taking care of a little medical business last week. So
Oh, yes, so some people go into our
oh, yeah, yeah. Because one of these eye procedures where you have to have a second thing. So I missed my work. I do worry about it. Twice, in 2 different ways.
That's fine, that's fine. It's still very much in the works, so
It's a little further along.
yeah, I'd love to, yeah. Always looking for feedback, so.
And I think that we should probably get some books from, they're mostly biographical.
Yes, that was me, yeah, that's right. There's a series of makers of Islamic world or something, yeah. You did good? And what did you think?
Well, our vendor had them all.
Oh, they did? Okay, great. Sorry?
They're older books, some of them.
Some of them are older, it's true. Oh, it's not. Is this One World, I believe, right?
Yes, yeah. But, you know, I just go through every month or so.
Oh, great, that's great. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's great. Oh, my pleasure. This is fun, yeah.
Oh, it is. It is, you know, because
sure. I feel it's also, yeah, it's a great way to introduce yourself to that field.
yeah.
I mean, I found that.
I remember I do a history for a little bit. Oh, the way to wake the students up is to talk about extended people.
That's right.
Talk about people.
Right, absolutely.
Except for the people really, the students really transit population.
Right.
Political views, you're talking about some interesting persons.
There really is. No, it's so true. I find another way that this works for students, especially is interviews. Or, I mean, it used to be a lecture, but now everything's so much on YouTube that interviews actually do quite well because they also often bring a biographical element that students can relate to or piques their interest in a way.
So, who are some of the people interviewed that you would use? Are they figures of who are in the world, or scholars, or both?
They're scholars of it. Sometimes they're scholars of the kind of contribution. So there's one figure in my field, this who's essentially not involved in Islam, but also does quite a lot of work in conceptualizing the field of Islamic studies. It's very difficult to get a hold of these people because they're very sophisticated. So actually to hear him talk about it.
We're going to get started. Welcome. Beautiful afternoon. We're glad to have you here at the Institute. I'm Susan Levine, Director of the Institute of Humanities. And this is our last Fellows Lecture of the year. We're very excited to have Sultan Tepe giving her talk today. Before we start, though, I do want to say a couple of things. First, I want to thank this year's Fellows. They've been a great group. It's been a really wonderful year here at the Institute. A lot of fascinating conversation and also a lot of fun. So the combination couldn't be better. And I just want to encourage you all to stay in touch, bring us your books when they come out, come to some programs next year, and just keep us posted on how you're doing. I also wanted to invite everyone to a reception after in sort of our year-end little celebration, and that'll be right outside this door, so you're welcome to stay for that. And then also I want to just say that we have a full program of lectures next year and a whole new class of fellows, and I know all this year's fellows are sad about that, but we do have a new group coming in, and I urge you to check the website and your mailboxes, and you'll see. We also have a list of the announcements. I think, Linda, aren't they? Is next year's schedule outside, Linda? We don't have that yet. Okay, but it'll be on our website. So Without further ado, I would like to ask our colleague Andy McFarland to introduce Sultan this afternoon.
Hi, I'm Andy McFarland from the Political Science Department, and I have been the recipient in the past of 2 Humanities Institute fellowships, for which I want to once again thank Humanities Institute people for really helping me to advance my career, and I am now introducing Sultan Tepe. Sultan is a Weberian, one who refers to the construction of ideal typical or archetypologically bound concepts to illuminate social reality, normally found to be more complex than predictions from the ideal type. But the contrast between the ideal simplification and complex social action yields new meaningful constructs useful for comparative purposes. In a second sense, Sultan is Weberian in that she is interested in the relationship between religious beliefs and everyday behavior, just as Weber was interested in the relationship between religion and economic behavior. Sultan is interested in the relationship between religious beliefs and some mundane activities as political party competition, political attitudes, and governmental policies. However, no one can do as much history as Weber, so Sultan does some history in her book and so forth, but this sort of Weberian attitude is fused with recent American social science, at least of the last generation, which I would characterize as political science / anthropological, which is basically 1, go yourself and look, 2, do elite interviews, 3, do mass social surveys, and 4, follow the newspapers, TV, social media, and also look at documents that have come out in the last generation or so, rather than a total historical sweep. This attitude is manifested in her book from 2008, Beyond Sacred and Secular Politics of Religion in Israel and Turkey in 2008. She's currently working on 2 books. Part of one will be presented today. The other she has done on research in comparing 3 mosques in the Chicago area in terms of social organization, social behavior, and actually as symbolized by their architecture. She also has done work on urban studies in Istanbul. In terms of professional activity then, of course Sultan has given papers at the leading political science professional conferences, the American, the Midwest, the International, and also in her subfield, Middle Eastern Studies Association. And in regard to the Middle Eastern Studies Association, of course, Sultan is more or less permanently a national activist and is doing all those associational activities, such as serving on editorial boards, committees, organizing conferences, and so forth. And she has a similar role in the Religion and Politics Association, part of the American Political Science Association. Sultan is very active nationally and locally in the Fulbright program, and is someone who brings Fulbright students, graduate students, to the UIC campus. Sultan is also globally active. She spends 6 to 8 weeks a year in Istanbul. She occasionally attends, those specialized international conferences to which you have to be invited, and there are no more than 30 people there. She also volunteers with the International Studies Office, mentoring international students, and she Skypes all the time. International studies. In fact, I first learned what Skype meant. Okay, and winding up here, Sultan is a graduate of Boğaziçi University in Istanbul, which emphasizes the American social science approach to studies. It's sort of like the Swarthmore of Turkey. She got a BA there. She has her PhD from the University of Texas at Austin in 2002, and since 2002 has been at UIC. Sultan's main accomplishment at UIC is actually her extraordinary role as a graduate instructor, which was recognized this year in the Graduate Mentoring Award, over 4 of which are given through the whole campus. And she is certainly both professional and very personal in mentoring graduate students. The award, of course, is given, it was based on testimonial letters from 10 different graduate students. Sultan has been Graduate Studies Director in our department from 2009 to 2013, so I will now introduce Professor Sultan.
And then I recall authoring a paper, so still you can say good things about it. It's great, because we were disagreeing on some things. This has been a great year. I would like to thank the Institute for giving me the opportunity to take my research completely, not completely, but a new area, state secularism, practice of state secularism, and theologians. Because of their support early last summer and this fall, I was able to walk the hallways of the Directorate of Religious Affairs. This is Turkey's Directorate of Religious Affairs. And I visited many Islamic centers, mosques, and heard rarely told stories of women theologians. I'm grateful to my co-fellows, each and every one of them. Because of them, I'm able to better appreciate hyper-ghetto, key values, Barclays, strive for happiness, counts numbers, Bolivian good life. Am I missing something? The art of presencing, of course. I'm sure magical realism, of course, ex-Rican, right? And Sue and Linda makes the Stevenson's Hall based on their very intellectual place, and I really mean it. They've been extremely supportive, and I couldn't ask for a better intellectually intriguing environment. To explain the background of this research, I will do something quite new for me. I'm a really conventional political scientist. I will start with a parable in the Quran. And this parable was brought to my attention by a woman theologian. And I'll give you the background story later. In a parable from Quran, Moses, who's known for his immense knowledge, wonders if there's anyone with greater understanding. If he travels to the junction of 2 seas, he's told, he can meet someone with comprehensive knowledge from God. He declares his determination to find it for this person and deepen his own insight. And after missing some markers, and he retraces the clues and finally finds Khidr. And those of you, I know you are familiar with Quran. Khidr is not in Quran, but that's how the story is told. A mystical person who possesses divine wisdom and described by some as Islam, Hermes, or Elijah. When Moses meets Khidr, he asks permission to join him to gain some judgment. To his surprise, Khidr tries to discourage him and says that you can't endure what I do. And Moses insists, and he pledges to be patient and advising. Khidr continues to warn him and says that how can you be patient about things that you can't even comprehend? And how can the versions slightly different because translations are different? Because of Moses' resolve and assurance, Khidr eventually permits him to follow on the condition that he wouldn't ask any question unless he's permitted so. When they embark upon a journey, Moses finds himself astonished because Khidr tries to pierce a hole in the boat of a fine group of people who offer them a ride. He kills an innocent boy. He repairs a wall in a village where people are far from kind and welcoming. Each time Moses is dismayed, protests and asks. This is from all the depictions from children's book. I will be using some children's book depictions. So these are all images I collected from different books. So each time Moses protests and asks, why do you do such great things? Why did you wreck the boat of fine people, slay an innocent boy, reward a village that lacked minimum generosity? Moses asks forgiveness. Khidr reminds him of his promise and requests his patience, and Khidr asks for forgiveness for his forgetfulness. And finally, because of Moses' incessant interruption, Khidr decides to part ways because he lives. He explains why he did what he did. Before we go there, he says that the boat saved the good owners from the privacy of an oppressive ruler who didn't seize damaged boats. The slain boy would have tormented and oppressed his good parents. The wall protected the inheritance of a good father for his orphans. Most important, Khidr said, all of his actions were done from the wisdom of God. The parable ends abruptly, leaves readers with many questions. What did Moses learn from this experience? Did he need to be more patient? Why would Khidr not allow him to ask any question? So this is parable. I wanted to read it to keep the details. It was amazing. I was trying to find a translation. Translations really differ, so it's sort of hard to get the story right. So this parable was brought to my attention by a woman theologian to explain the problem of textualization of Quran. What she means by that, the treatment of Quran as a text with rather clear narrative and unequivocal meaning. Such views ignores the fact that Quran is not a list of rules, commandments. It contains many parables, metaphors, and ambiguous statements. Conventional interpretations, for instance, ignore the details and use the meaning of the two C's, the parable that I just explained, to show unexplainable but just reasons behind what appear to be calamities. So there's a cartoon here, and this was a coincidence. After she explained this problem of contextualization, I was just looking at the children's book, and this is how the Surah Cave was introduced to kids. It says that you're lucky that we have the direct revelations, and the second part say that, but do you realize something? In these stories, the details are not important. The moral of the story is. So the moral of the story for some women, and the women theologians I talked to, is the problem of textualization of Quran, treating all these details as stories with singular meaning. Obfuscated by these explanations, of course, many critical questions. For instance, why is it that Moses was not warned against his poor judgment at the end of the parable? Can an average person ever know what Khidr knew? If our knowledge is always limited, temporarily especially, how can we be just in our actions? So, I want to go back to Quran and also give some theological foundation for this problem, textualization of Quran. Quran's self-description is rather interesting because Al-Imran, Surah Al-Imran and verse 7 says that in it there are verses with clear meanings and there are verses that are ambiguous and require interpretation. So many of these questions that I mentioned about Moses, they are not just trivial questions, frivolous conjectures, but actually Quran intentionally and deliberately open up a discursive sphere for discussions by these parables. So decisive role of the interpretation in Quran invites us to engage with the questions that who are the people producing these exegeses, these interpretations, not only the content of exegesis, but also who are the people producing these exegeses. So that's pretty much the background of my work in a way. And also maybe some of you didn't catch it. One of the women theologians said that there are 80 verses, there are 6,246 verses in Quran. The number changes, sometimes people give different numbers, but that's kind of the average. And among these 6,000 plus, there are only 500 people who say that it's unambiguous, it's clear, these are the norms, but the rest require, rest of the verses require interpretation and active engagement with the text. So that takes me, you would say that why we are talking about this if you're studying Turkey's Directorate of Religious Affairs. The reason we are talking about this because Turkey's Directorate of Religious Affairs is the main interpreter of the religious texts in Turkey. Perhaps because of the importance of interpretations, one of the main institutions of secular Turkey is the Directorate of Religious Affairs, and its role is to approve the authenticity of the religious texts and exegesis. And it has its seal of approval. It shows which texts are free from error and which interpretations are acceptable. Perhaps because of this unique institution, and maybe because many people don't know it, but they know the overall function of the institution, Turkey secularism is often considered as the foundation of its democracy, and it's often considered as the only secular Muslim well-functioning democracy in the Muslim world, which is debatable, but it's often the part of the common discourse. And Turkey's DRA, its main institution, is considered as the embodiment of state secularism par excellence. It's state's modernizing tool, hand to tame traditional religion and to create a religion, Islam, compatible with secular nationalist discourse. Many people, especially because of the Arab Spring, we have this conversation, we have this discourse that Turkey is also model to the emerging democracies in the Muslim world. Let me give you just a quick example of such conversation.
Over the last year, as much of the Arab world has sunk into chaos, many Arab eyes have turned towards Turkey. Could this country provide a model for those new Arab states, a successful blend of Islam and democracy?
So this is from the Doha debates, it's one of the recent months, and the entire section was if and how Turkey could be a model to the Muslim world. I want to show a couple of clips, but I'm afraid it's going to make my job really hard here. I need to go back to the... So all these covers, these are the covers of different journals, and they are posing the same question: can Turkey be a model to the emerging Muslim democracies? What is neglected in these assumptions or in these questions that DRA's role often evades public scrutiny. We don't know enough about the main institutional model secular republic, which is the DRA. So in this research, I was trying to address this question: what exactly DRA does and what Turkish secularism means, because it's such a reified concept, such a overused and almost cliche term. So I'm trying to give some meaning to it by using it, by looking at it from an institutional perspective and also from the perspective of its critiques. So if you want to look at the main research questions, these are the research questions that I will try to answer. How does the state power play out in the religious sphere? Because often we talk about state secularism as if state and religious spheres are completely different. So I would like to explain a little bit how the state power plays out in the religious sphere. What are the exegetical positions and practices promoted by the state's main religious institutions? Because it's one of its jobs to create and scrutinize religious knowledge. And how can individuals, given the dominance of the traditional beliefs and the state's involvement in the religious sector, how can individuals challenge the dominant exegesis and religious practices? And what role, if any, women can play in Islamic debates? Do different interpretation of Quranic texts and the religious practices, especially those of women, have any political or social impact? Because someone that before I started my research said that, why do you waste your time? Who cares what women think about Islam and the Quranic texts? For some people, this is just waste of time as a researcher and as a common person, because these exegeses, they don't matter, they don't make any difference. So to engage with these questions, what I did, just like any other good political scientist, I did my homework, I did some ethnographic work in Turkey, and you will see all these different parts. I talked to almost 128 Directorate of Religious Affairs employees, women and men, and I attended many Friday khutbahs, and I conducted in-depth interviews with women theologians. You will hear about 3 of them, but I need a larger set. Because many of these women, they were mostly from their home. I had home visits, I read their books and memoirs, and participated in home-based Quran meetings, and visited different mosques, and the list goes on. So many of you don't know how field research works, so that's a couple of pictures from my field work. Any of you, if you try to do field research in the Middle East, especially in Turkey, it comes with too much tea and too many bagels. And some of my interviews lasted 6 hours. So this was taken by a UIC student who had meeting after one of my interviews. So I believe it was almost 7 hours of interview. So what I will do, I will give you a brief history of the Turkish DRA, Directorate of Religious Affairs, and what I consider its paradoxical practices. The institution was started in 1924. I'm not going to go as back as 1924. I will focus on the recent practices, especially after post-1994. And then I will give you my summary of my interviews with the women theologians, their backgrounds and works, and their exegesis. Some of the statements might sound controversial to some of you if you're familiar with Islam. So although my account of their exegesis are theirs, I didn't put a word, so I'm just giving their account, so in case you have questions about some of the ideas. Turkey's laicite, in Turkish is laiklik, it's a different term, it's not secularism, we use it interchangeably, secularism and laicite. I don't have time to get into it, but laicite is slightly different. Laicite and secularism, they are different, not slightly different, they are different etymologically, and they have different theoretical implications. So in Turkish it's laicite, laiklik, it's a French word, it's transferring power to lay people from clergy. And the first Turkish constitution, 1924, described the state as an Islamic state. I think many people ignore this fact that Turkish Republic was established as an Islamic state, and the DRA was established right after. So the DRA precedes in a way the secular state, the laic state. And in 1928, the Islamic state just disappeared. Until 1937, there wasn't any item, but there was a statement about religious. In 1937, Article 2 was reintroduced, and it was stated that Turkish state is a republican, nationalist, statist, laic, and reformist. So it's a statement, and many of the reformists would, pro-Islamic movements would say that it's one of the main problems in Turkey because it's a foreign word, it's in the constitution, it was introduced in 1937, and there's no explanation. It's a foreign word, it's a French word, Turkified French word. The spelling is slightly different to Turkify it. It's a French word. So till 1965, there wasn't anything about DRA's functioning, and 1965, there was a special law saying that the DRA shall exercise its duties prescribed in its special law in accordance with the principle of secularism without endorsing any political views, thoughts, and aiming at national solidarity and integrity. This, without supporting, endorsing any political thought will be a problem later, you will see. So even though the DRA is supposed to be a politically neutral institution, its institutional structure is as such that the director is appointed by the Council of Ministers, often by the Prime Minister. So I have in the paper all the details about the High Council, but I'm going to skip that part. What is also important, just to give you some numbers, all of the mosques in Turkey, all of them, they are not the private mosques, controlled by the DRA. And the numbers are around 85 to be precise. The number changes. The DRA gives 82,000, but it's around 85,000 mosques. They are all controlled by the DRA. And among others, the initial thought was DRA would just address the needs of daily religious needs of the people domestically. It was a very domestic institution. But around 1970s, because of the migrants in Europe, it became an international institution because it provided services in Europe. Now, if you look at the numbers, there are 26 countries that DRA maintains mosques, and the number is increasing rapidly. What is also important that you can't go to Hajj in Turkey on your own. You have to go through the state system. So all the pilgrimages and all the services, all the religious services are controlled by DRA. So it's an institution that will have impact, that has impact on everyone's life. If you want to do anything about religion, you have to deal with DRA. And DRA assumes that the services reach 80% of the people in Turkey. If you look at the numbers, even with the most conservative estimates, 80% would be a little bit of exaggeration, but if you look at even the most conservative surveys, every 1 out of 4 people in Turkey receive services from DRA. And if you look at the Friday prayers, around 19 million people go to Friday prayers. And if you look at the numbers, 1 out of 2 men in Turkey, they receive services from DRA. Not only they receive services from DRA, because they go to Friday prayers, they hear the messages of DRA. So DRA is really powerful, especially in a male's life. And 19 million, it's the most conservative estimate, and it doesn't take into account Ramadan and religious days that we have higher numbers. Also, to give you an idea about the DRA's budget, often, even it's a really important institution, people don't hear about DRA except the time of the budget making, because DRA budget often dwarfs the budgets of other critical institutions, including the Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Health, and in this case I wanted to compare it with the Ministry of Justice because Turkey has been going through immense judicial reform. So this ministry has one of the highest spending, so you can just compare. DRA is well-funded institution, and just last year, this year, I think its budget is 20% more than the previous year. So it's getting an immense amount of support. And also DRA has a foundation. Foundation's accounts are not scrutinized, and we don't know how much the DRA's foundation is spending. So if you combine the two, we're not talking about a trivial state institution. We're talking about an institution well-funded, process of transformation, very effective on the lives of individuals in Turkey. This is also just to give you, at some point I wanted to compare DRA's budget with the disabled services, children's services, social aids, all these social and women's status. So I think this represents visually how much we are getting. How is their approach in Turkey? This is a scholar, I should probably name this, she's one of my former professors and one of my mentors, but her view captures the conventional account of DRA and how it's perceived in Turkey and beyond, because Turkish scholarship set the tone on its perception overseas. For the founding fathers of the Republic, cultural change was the key to Turkey's modernization. These men were very much influenced by the Enlightenment ideas of science and progress that entered the empire through the young Ottoman and young Turk movements of the late 19th and 20th century. So it's rumored that Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the founder of the state and the first president, kept Rousseau's book at his bedside. For Kemal and his associates, the role of Islam in Ottoman society and politics was responsible for its failure to modernize. So for many people, when the Turkish Republic was established, the founding elite, the secular elite, had this war on Islam. So they wanted to tame Islam, they wanted to tame traditional Islamic practices. So I have a second layer of questions, more specific questions about the DRA, Directorate of Religious Affairs. So one of the questions, of course, can a state institution whose rector is appointed by the ruling government be politically neutral? How does the DRA advance or challenge predominant economic and political practices? What type of context does it provide for the religious practices of individuals? And given that Turkey's modernism and secularism is trying to create a new image for women, how does the DRA promote this or challenge this image? Just like I'm repeating the similar questions, how does the DRA deal with some of the controversial gender-related issues? And because of the increase in the number of women employees in DRA, if these women can play any role in changing the DRA structure. And the same question goes for the women theologians. So I will be answering, hopefully, most of these questions at the end of this lecture. So, the secular state, the paradoxes of the area, I packed a couple of different things based on the recent policies and practices of the DRA. Probably I'm not going to have time to cover all of them because I'm going to spend some time on women theologian. What I'm going to do is sample two of them. The first one is quite interesting, either secular or more traditional, a new mosque. This is based on one of the campaigns of the DRA. I found out about this campaign when I was in Ayvalık, one of the towns in Turkey, when I was getting into a mosque and I saw this invitation to the kids. And my first reaction was, it's a joke, it cannot be real. But it wasn't real, then I did my research and I got all this information. It became an important part of, interesting part of my research. So what happened in summer of 2013, the DRA launched a campaign to attract students to the mosque. This is one of the concerns that many of the kids might not come to the mosques. I don't know if it's based on any data and research, but there is this concern that kids might not come to mosques. So what they did, the DRA did, launched a campaign saying that children that come to the mosque so you can get your gifts. If you complete a 40-day Quranic training, you become part of a raffle prize, and you can get tablets, bicycles, and all different prizes. So let me show you a short video from the gift-giving ceremony of one of these.
Üçüncü olan Abdurrahman Dedeoğlu'na Hamza Özdemir hocam vermek üzere, hediyesini vermek üzere buyurun. Duran
gift-giving ceremony, and those of you who are talking, this has been really successful. Many kids ended up going to mosques, so we should acknowledge it. But it also created so much debate and so much, it was fiercely criticized by both secular and the traditional elite. I will use this as an example to show you that how DRA is not an institution claimed by the secular, it's not an institution claimed by traditional, it's somewhere in between, so the somewhere in between may be a critical question. So what happened for the religious people by launching this campaign, the DRA was disciplined in the religious mosques' holy status, because there were many activities in the mosque as a result. And DRA was just disrespecting religion. So for secular circles, it wasn't the activities per se, it wasn't the activities that were objectionable, but giving out prizes for performing religious rituals was viewed as morally unacceptable. DRA was abusing or using children's desire to gain gifts, toys, to sow the seeds of religious ideas. So that was the main critique for them. What happened after this campaign, you see, if you look at the traditional groups' publications, they really scrutinized DRA's children's books and campaigns, and they had many of these announcements. It's here, it literally says that she's praying with that not fully covered head. And they also looked at ads like that, traditional groups, and they, let me show the ad they use. So this is one of the DRA affiliated ads to promote aggressive in its campaign, and it was using anything it can gather, and it was hollowing out some good, important religious ideas and imbuing them with poisonous images and values. Sorry, this system looks fine, but I need to. So. DRA again didn't please the secularists, they were really pissed, and the traditional groups got really angry. Actually, I was just looking at Ikhwan, the Turkish Ikhwan's website, and they really are critical of these campaigns, and especially using images and with children's images to promote Islamic ideas. They feel that it's not a good synthesis, it's really taking some important values out of Islam. So these sort of examples, we have many of them, they raise the question if the DRA is pursuing its assumed historical mission and seeking to tame traditional religious practices, or is it expanding traditional practices by using the state's power and new tools? Of course, you will get completely different answers based on the question, based on the group you're talking to. So, to give you another example about paradoxes of DRA, DRA seems to be objecting secular states' own ideals. I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to focus on Mualla Selçuk, one and only member of the DRA's High Religious Council. It's the highest council, and is the one giving the last word on the controversial religious issues. So in the DRA's series, there is only one member Mualla Selçuk. Before I explain our story, I should mention that Turkish state banned headscarf. It's one of the reasons probably you heard about Turkish secularism. And the ban wasn't really enforced till the Islamic movements gained power, especially in the mid-1990s. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to write my dissertation on the topic, because I experienced it myself, the expansion and all the Islamic movements and the parties' rise to political power. What happened, DRA never ever approved that ban. Actually, DRA issued fatwa saying that state cannot ban headscarf, and covering the head was a commandment, religious commandment, and any decision against it was an infringement on religious rights and human rights. So, state banned the headscarf, but states in another branch, DRA, opposed that ban. And we see a similar pattern, for instance, secular modernizing elite, they want to promote prayers in Turkish, because they feel that one of the reasons why Islam is not as progressive in Turkey, because it's in Arabic and people don't understand. When they cite a surah or when they read Quran, usually they are reading in Arabic and they don't really understand the norms and values, so they want to promote prayers in Turkish. DRA also consistently said that you can't pray in Turkish. You can pray your individual personal prayer in Turkish, but all the holy prayers, the rituals, they need to be done in Arabic, even if you don't understand it, because if you translate them, you're losing meaning and you're undermining the sacred meaning. So the Turkish secular Turkish DRA opposes many of the secular elites' ideas. So that's another paradox. So Mualla Selçuk, what she did, she wrote a dissenting opinion on the covering of head, and she just wanted to put a minor note saying that we don't have to do it all the time. So there could be exceptions. So DRA, following its own tradition, first published the decision, because what happens, DRA publishes all of the High Council's decisions in its newsletter. So a traditional group opposed. So the council, it was after that the issue was published and it was in the stage of the distribution. So they suspended the distribution, and they literally, it's page 46. I know about it because Mualla Selçuk showed me the page. So many people just ripped off the page and they distributed the newsletter without her opinion. So Mualla Selçuk's decision was allowed in a way, so the High Council just accepted it as a dissenting opinion, but it wasn't published and distributed to the religious circles because of the fear of potential backlash and critique. So this has been the story of DRA. DRA always tries to engage with traditional groups and tries to listen to them and appease them as much as possible. Appease maybe is a strong word. Respond to them as much as possible. So different examples can be given about how secular states, DRA is opposing secular policies, but maybe what is important, my PowerPoint just gave up on me. So, can we have one to get this? So what DRA did, which would be consistent with the state's policies, wanted to centralize, synchronize all of its prayers and all of its sermons. It was a policy introduced, ironically, by an anti-Islamist government in 1997. The idea was to control all the sermons, all the prayers in all of the mosques, so we can create a centralized discourse. What happened, Islamic government, instead of changing it and reversing it, and wanted to use it. And you would think that this is a great idea for a secular republic, because if you want to tame religion, if you want to tame religious ideas, for some reason I can't believe this. Centralized system would work. Because centralized system reduce the face-to-face interaction with the imams and it became really unpopular. So now the DRA is going back to the original practice. So what is also important from this experience, the more state actually tries to centralize its religious discourse and engagement, the less effective its policies become. So maybe one of the ironies, if you look at the conventional explanation of Turkish DRA or the Turkish secularism, it tries to centralize the control the religious discourse, but the examples show that the more state tries to centralize, actually its discourse and its tools become less effective. So what I have here, another example of how DRA is centralizing its services, allow fatwa. You can dial a free number and you can get a fatwa, and you can, this is one of the questions they receive. It's about grafting, if you can graft an apple to a pear, questions like that. So, but you can pick up a phone and you can call DRA and you can get a religious opinion. So, maybe I'll skip this part. This is another part that shows that after Turkey's pro-Islamic party, Justice and Development Party, came to power, for many people the question was, if we had a secular state and if we had an Islamic party, pro-Islamic party in power, would that Islamic party change the policies and introduce different secular practices, or would it change the DRA? So what happened, instead of changing DRA, the party, the Justice and Development Party, used its model, business model, and DRA adopted more and more Justice and Development Party's business approach. So this is its last strategic plan. I was at the meeting, I heard the plan from the writers, and the language was amazing because it uses all of the language of the business assessment. SWOT test, those of you who are familiar with the SWOT test, it's a business. So DRA treats itself as almost a business enterprise and uses all these business terms when it releases its activities reports. This one, the mosque law, is the name that I came up with. This infuriated some people because summer of 2013, just past summer, DRA decided to rank its, many of the mosques, let me back up and explain that, many of the mosques, the first floors could be used as stores or could be rented out to different businesses, and many people opposed to do that because they wanted to keep mosques out of the business relations. So DRA decided to rank them, and just on the condition that all these, the revenues, 10% would go back to DRA. What is also interesting and funny, many of these mosques, they have restrooms, and if you're in the city, you usually go to your mosque. So now many of them are privatized, and the revenues are collected by DRA. So DRA is known as the big company in the restroom business right now. People, when they come off DRA, they make this point that they are the one running the restrooms in Istanbul or big cities. Interest is not allowed in Islam, charging and paying for interest, so many people were concerned because Justice and Development Party aggressively promoting neoliberal policies and market policies. So one of the questions, there are different examples, the one that I wanted to use recently, DRA published an opinion on if you can take out loans and pay interest if you're buying a house. So DRA came up with this really creative solution. I had to read the decisions a couple of times because it didn't make much sense. So you cannot take out loans from the bank to buy a house because you pay interest, but you can buy the house directly from the bank. So even the bank is charging you interest, you're just buying the house from a seller who charges a higher rate. So they really take with this idea that if the banks are sellers, then you can buy, because even you pay interest, it's in the final price. You're looking at me, that was my face. But if you take a loan and pay interest directly, it's not allowed. So what happens in many of the cases, DRA would find a solution to make market mechanisms work and would create a religious justification for that, just like this one. You can treat a bank as a home seller. They can ask any price they want, and if they're including interest, that's their problem, but as a buyer, you're not responsible. So what we see, many practices I like that. The mosque is, it's saying at a really affordable rate. It's using its meeting places for weddings and saying that you can rent it at a reasonable rate. So these sort of activities are really new in Turkey. So what we see, neoliberal practices are taking over mosque and taking over DRA's activities. Now I want to turn to, that's going to be an awfully long talk. I want to give you some sense about women theologians and what they say about this. I called it paradoxical power of the state because of the headscarf ban. Many women couldn't go to the schools, public schools, and many women couldn't work for the states. As a result, many of them ended up going to the theology departments. It was the only place that headscarf women could get training, education, and also DRA, because it was the only place women can work. So the state ban on headscarf increased the number of students in theology departments and increased the number of women employees in DRA. So these are the numbers that we see if you look at the DRA's women employees. This is the highest council. This is the most important part of the DRA, and we don't have any women. And these are the religious experts. We have very few, around 359, I believe. And muftis, 0. That's another important part of DRAs. There are 9 assistant muftis. That's the highest ranked official of DRA in a city. And specialized preachers, we have around 150 of them women, and preachers, we have more. And interestingly enough, and maybe as expected, if you go to the teachers, there are many teachers, Quranic teachers. And DRA at this point it has around 17,000 women, and 15,000 of them are Quran teachers. So there's this really increasing number of women in the DRA, but the employment opportunities are in certain places. So I call this paradoxical power of the state. State suppresses and channels a certain group to a certain institution. In this case, it's theology departments, DRA. But women in DRA, they do certain things. So now I'm going to turn 3 of these women. And one of them, Beyza Begin, she's the first preacher hired by DRA. And she's the first one to graduate from the theology department in Turkey, and she's the first female theology professor. And these are the books she published because she believes in the religious literacy, and she believes that religious literacy is really weak in Turkey. She publishes a children's book. And Nevin Meric is the second person, woman theologian. She's the first woman to answer fatwa questions. She's the one who answers questions via phone most of the time, and she's the author of one of the most popular books. I couldn't find this edition because it's sold out. It's one of the first books on daily practices, how modernization occurred in Turkey. She looks at the daily practices and everyday lives, the Ottoman period. And the question for her, if modernization is the reason behind all these social and cultural decay, how exactly it happened. But she's a prolific writer, she has multiple books, and her recent book is a female doctor, a practicing present doctor, and now she's writing biographies of religious women, and many of them are not known. Fatma Akdokor is actually the paradoxical power of the state. Her life captures all these paradoxical powers because of her headscarf. She was in the literature department. She had to transfer to the theology department. She finished in 9 years because she was actively participating in the protest. She got her job, she was happy. She said that later the headscarf ban was expanded to the state schools. She lost her job again. So she considers herself multiple victims of the state policies. And she became a Quranic teacher first, but she's a PhD, she was overqualified, and finally she got the job of being the Director of Internal Training Program for the DRA. She studied Al-Tabari, one of the most interesting works on Islam in Turkey. It will come out as a book. And Al-Tabari tries to explain how we should approach Prophet Muhammad's saying, hadith. And she follows his point, and she bases her exegesis on his point that Prophet had dual roles. He was an extraordinary person receiving revelations, but he was also an ordinary person. So if you take all of his life as sacred and all of his words as sacred, we are missing Prophet's own self-description and mission. So you can't really treat everything about Prophet's saying as sacred. This is really huge in Islam because hadiths, the sayings of prophets, are often used as an interpretive framework for Quran. So her work, based on Al-Tabari, she uses Al-Tabari. She doesn't say that these are her views, but she acts on them. Creates this really controversial account of Prophet's sayings. When I asked them, so the story, the parable that I used first was brought to my attention by Akdokor. Akdokor said that, look at this parable. I had this discussion with my husband and a couple of male friends. They think completely differently. And she said that, look at this parable and how people get different things. So it became one of my in-depth interview questions. So whenever I talk to all these people, a couple of hundreds people, I would ask them, so tell me about the parable and what you make of it. And I was amazed because every single time a different answer and a different side of the story would come up. So for Birgin, she makes this point that traditions are great and wonderful, but traditions are almost closed enterprises. They closed interpretation, and they have a moral of the story, just like the cartoon. So they take the moral of the story, they teach the moral of the story. As a result, we have strong traditionalism and weak individualism. That's the main problem in Quran. So there is this, the parable meeting of the two seas is often used for the importance of hidden knowledge. We don't know enough, therefore we should bear some calamities, some bad happenings because we don't know enough. So she says that actually the entire surah, if you look at Surah Tepe, it's about knowledge and information. Because those of you who know the surah, it gives you accounts of the importance of historical details and maybe the significance of historical details, and it's about knowledge. So she says that actually if you look at the Quran, or this surah, it tells us there are different knowledges, and theology is just one of them. And she gave this story about Prophet, how once he questions people, date tree, and later he found out that people had really bad crop because they took his questioning as an discouragement from grafting, and they didn't graft their tree, and they lost the crop. She said that Prophet told them, you needed to consult with the people, you needed to consult with the accumulated knowledge in that area. I'm not an expert on everything. So Prophet told everyone around him that he didn't know everything. He had a specific knowledge which she considered theology. So for her, the main problem in Islam is even a prophet cannot know everything. Moses was a prophet, he had immense knowledge, but he didn't know many things. So all we have is our reason, and we shouldn't expect to master the knowledge of the unknown. Marriage, who answers the fatwa question, her take on the parable was completely different, which confused me because she took it more as a sign of importance of contract and keeping promise. And one of the reasons she mentioned that, she said that on the fatwa line, many of the questions about breaking promises and not keeping the promises. So for her, the parable is about contractual relationship and importance of keeping the promise. Because Moses promised, and it's really clear in the parable, he couldn't keep his promise 3 times. So the question for her, what if he kept his promise? So she praised the patience in this parable, said that the real story is about patience. And she gives 3 different types of patience, and she explains the importance of patience. And she reduced the clear verses to 80. She said, I gave you the numbers, I said 500. She said that when I get the questions, she's always with Quran, because she's always looking into Quran to come up with answers. She said that actually I can see only 80 clear rules, rest I have to interpret. And she says that if people take these parables seriously, probably she wouldn't get as many calls. So Abdul comes from a completely different perspective. I believe that in part because she has been fighting with the issues of justice because of her headscarf, because of her struggle with the system. She says that the whole parable is about justice. And what we should take from this parable is that Khidr, who had transcendental knowledge, could infringe on the rights of others, but no one, including Moses, a prophet, doesn't have that type of knowledge. Therefore, we need to look at how we treat justice, and we need to ask how can we just, how can we be just. And because we have limited knowledge for her, the story, the important part of the story is about Moses. Just be like Moses, just like Moses, our duty is call out unfair treatments if and when we see them, because Moses was screaming and protesting every single time he saw injustice. So for her, what is really clear in Quran, if there is a negative example, it's always spelled out, it's always marked, there is no confusion. But end of the story, this parable is really different because it ends abruptly. We don't even know what happened, we don't even know if Moses was right or... So for her, this is a sign. If Moses was not rebuked, that means that he's an example. At least he's not a negative example. So we should object injustices whenever we see them, and we can't ignore them, assuming that there is some hidden reasons. She believes that the parable, if it's not read carefully, it might create some ideas that when you see injustices, ignore them, because there might be some reason behind it, this hidden reason behind it. So these women, I think that takes me back to the initial question. Does it really matter they have a different take on the Quran? And as my friend said when I talked about my research idea first, she said, who cares? Does it have an impact on practices? So that's the part that I had no idea. When I talked to these women, I had absolutely no idea about the impact they had. So my interest was why these people, I wanted to learn about them. I really wanted to learn how they engage with the text of Quran, because Quran requires interpretation, and I wanted to understand a human perspective would be different. And the answer was clear. It's really different, because one of my games, as I told you, was asking male's perspective on the parable. As a good social scientist, maybe I will have a chart in my book saying the male interpretation of the parable and the female. They look at different things, but does it really matter? They read text differently. So all these women, because they have worked for the DRA and they continue to work for DRA, they are really critical of the DRA. And they feel that DRA avoids some practices and some ideas because it doesn't want to look too traditional and unconventional. And traditional circles, they don't ignore DRA. Actually, they really read DRA maybe more closely than any other group. This is why one of the most circulated newsletters had this line about Islamic feminism. So they say that DRA, the author, very influential author, say that DRA has been glaring with its excessively feminist actions. For instance, last year on Ramadan, they opened one of the mosques only to women, and they feel that this dominant reformist modernist mentality produced Islamic feminism. But anything that conflicts the Quran, Sunnah, Sharia is unacceptable, and towards so is Islamic feminism. And they go to the Friday prayers and they say that, he says, but it presents a group, it's not a commandment. There is no rule to keep women away from mosque, but it's much more preferred if they pray at home, women pray at home. And calling women to mosque is an unprecedented deviance in the 1400-year-long Islamic history. So, that tells you how the traditional groups are looking at some of the women presence in the area and some of the activities. This Ramadan mosque plan, opening one of the mosques, main mosque in Ankara to women only, was the area's activity was promoted by one of these women. So, Bilgin, she refuses to put her headscarf, use headscarf based on her reading of Surah Nisa. I want to give you a sense of her style. This is her. She's talking to someone on the national TV about Eid Bayram holiday. And he simply says that may Bayram bring peace. This is one of the conventional things to say, and may Bayram bring peace. And she stops her and says that why should Bayram bring peace? Bayram is a day, just any other day. We make it Bayram, we might make it holiday. It's holiday, but we make it holiday. So what do you do in your personal life to bring peace? So that's her style. She's a questioner. She stops people, she questions them, especially when she sees there's an ignorance, what she would say, about religious ideas. So even a simple statement, may this holiday bring peace, for her misses something. Holiday is holy because we treat it as holy and we need to be responsible all the time. But her presence and her look is really confusing because when she speaks like a very religious person. When she looks as a secular person. She says that that's her protest. Her bodily presence, she told me she had made book projects. She didn't want to do any of them because she thought that writing all these books in Turkey, that people don't read books. She said it doesn't do anything. I just want to show up. I just want to look. I just want to be. I just want to challenge visual habits because there are strong visual habits. If you go to a religious group, you want to see a certain type of women. You want to hear a certain type of language. She confuses everyone. She's extremely religious in her manner and in her language, but her look is not religious. So she considers her presence, her look, as her main protest. And her take on Nisa, Surah Nisa, she gave me a really long explanation. This will be a part of the book, why she feels that head covering is not required. She said that Quran, Islam described itself as an advice. So covering, there are all these different reasons we can talk about it if you want. It's an advice, it's not a farce, it's not a commandment, it's not a requirement. But she also objects state's ban on headscarf. She says that the headscarf allowed women to act freely in the public. Now state is banning the headscarf to put people back to the private. That's a contradiction. So she doesn't oppose headscarf. She just feels that based on her reading, it's not a farce, and she doesn't want to do it because also that's her protest, to puzzle people and show that it's not black and white. And marriage is the other person. This is really, here. Marriage is who gives fatwa. Her protest is really different. It really confused me because she started perhaps the most effective movement in Turkey, Friday mosque movement. When I heard about her protest and successful movement, I asked her what happened, and I was ready to hear a good story, you know, how she was upset, how she knew about the problem. Her story was really boring in a way, because she said that I was bored in my room, in my office. I just wanted to pray in the main mosque, which is just next to her office. She wanted to go and pray there, and the person at the door said that you can't get in. Why? Because there's no place for women. She said that she didn't know, she had no idea that mosque didn't allow women. She works for the DRA, she's really busy, she prays in her room. So when she found out, she asked her friends, and they created this group. What they do, they just go to different mosques every Friday, and they ask people, can we pray there? And they say no, they protest because they are working for the DRA. They get in, they claim a place, and they pray. So that's what she does. And what happened though, because Turkey has, Istanbul, the main city's assistant mufti is a woman, and because she started this movement in DRA, and because one of the male member of the DRA was really supportive of the idea, DRA did something really unconventional and unexpected, asked all of the mosques in Turkey, 85,000 of them, to create a space for women. So all of them, 15,000 of them right now, they have clear, nice space for women in the main areas. They used to have places, but usually it would be in the basement or in a separate building, or as you see here, it's kind of a small area, you just squeeze in, and usually if you go to the main area, sometimes it's almost impossible to pray because there are so many people surrounding you. In Nuri Osmani, the mosque, she started the process, actually I was there, it was almost impossible to pray because it's so crowded. So that's her movement, and that is really interesting because DRA's own Islamic rules, Ibn tells that it's not required for women to pray in a mosque on Fridays. So she not only opposes a conventional practice, but also she opposes DRA's own religious rules. After her, what she did, she created this internal training for imam, for domestic violence. This is something they really care about because of the honors killing in Turkey, because of the increased numbers, really amazing numbers of domestic violence. If you look at the numbers in Turkey, 57% of families report domestic violence. It's huge, it's really high. And 57% in some cities, they reported around 62. So domestic violence is a critical issue. So she feels that Islam is not an identity, it's a justice issue. So what she does in her activism, she doesn't really take an Islamic issue, so-called Islamic issue like headscarf. She takes an issue like domestic violence that would appeal to all people. And she created this internal training for imams. So all of the imams in next year, all of the imams in Turkey, 115,000 of them will have this training, domestic violence training. So we have interviews, they feel that they didn't like it first, they feel that they learned a lot from it, and she is the pioneer, she's the one who put this together, and it has been really effective. So I will give you some brief conclusions so you can, hopefully, this is a really long presentation, you can ask some questions. So what I want to point out, there is this mutual interdependence in Turkey between DRA and the traditional religious groups. So if you want to talk about Turkish secularism, it's not opposing the traditional religious groups, actually it's engaging with them. DRA needs religious groups, traditional religious groups, to claim its authority, and religious groups, traditional groups, they need DRA to be public, to maintain their activities, and they feel that DRA actually tames the aggressive secularism of the state. So DRA is one of the most trusted institutions about the religious groups. If you look at the religious group, if you look at the survey data, if you set aside very religious people, more than 90% would trust DRA and they would oppose its annulment, because there's a debate that maybe Turkey should get rid of DRA. So opposing groups are very religious people. Secular people want to get rid of DRA. So there's this paradoxical relation. So secularizing neoliberalism, this is something that really surprised me. DRA feels that by adopting the tools of neoliberalism, like bringing kids to the mosque and giving them prizes, is just using the tools without changing the ideas of Islam. So actually it's curbing the power of neoliberalism or capitalism, but if you look at the practices, what you see, DRA is really secularizing, giving some religious meanings to neoliberal practices. So this notion that you can separate the practices from the thoughts, it's something that guides DRA's views, but it's really questionable because all these market practices, questionable market practices, are now justified by DRA because it's considered as religiously acceptable. Timothy Mitchell's idea that state, if you look at DRA, let me back up and say that DRA is a state institution in the Middle East, ex-state institution in the Middle East, and often it's considered as state because people don't make the distinction between state secularism and DRA. They say state, and DRA is a manifestation of state's power. In the Middle East, what is done often, state and state institutions are treated as ideologically coherent practices with extensive coercive power. So they are just freestanding and they are not, they are completely detached from society. As a result, they have these views of the protesters. These are the people, they are beyond the reach of the state and they just refuse the demands of the states. They resist, they oppose, they are outside the state's reach, at least they try to be outside state reach. So what we see in the women's theologians case, actually these women are strong, these women are effective because of the power of the state. They are both enforcers, victims, and objectors of the state power. They are all. So if they receive traditional educations in traditional religious schools, they wouldn't access Quran, they couldn't make all these statements about Quran that easily. They believe that their education and theology departments, because often they say that I know as much as so and so, why should I not say my interpretation? So state gives them the power, access to the religious text, and state is the foundation of their power. So I want to also end with this. What they do, both, all of them, after the beginning of marriage, they go and they expose all these gendered practices of DRA. Many of these practices are not known because many of them are in the mosques. As you know, mosques are often, if they are main beautiful mosques, these are tourist attractions, and usually there are signs that foreigners, visitors would just assume that they are the eccentric practices of the locals, and locals wouldn't challenge the mosque because they are sort of established traditional places. So mosques await criticism and scrutiny for different reasons. Objectified, it's sort of, because of its traditional status, it's not questioned. So what they do, they expose all these gendered practices. This is a sign. My colleagues, my fellows saw it. The first one says that don't get into fountain with socks on, or if you have socks on, and the second one says that women are not allowed. So that's one of the main historical mosques in Bursa. And this must be there forever, but marriage took a photo, sent it to the DRA. The sign is not there anymore. So what they do, they always expose, identify, and criticize all these gendered practices. And some practices, like during Hajj, pilgrimage, they are not known. So Bilgin spends time on their pilgrimage practices, because there are some gendered practices too. I don't have time to get into that. So I want to say just a few words about mosques, because when I started this research, I didn't take mosques seriously. I thought that my research would be on DRA, the state, and state institutions, because mosques are mosques. They are there, and they do all these different things, and we don't really think about them. But maybe just because of that, just because we take them for granted, they could be the real sites of change. Because all these women, when I told them marriage started our interviews. When I approached her first, she said, don't call me Islamic feminist, I'm not a feminist. Don't call me an activist, I'm not an activist. I'm a Quranist, I'm a traditionalist, because I acted from the first mosque. The first mosque is my source of inspiration, because the Prophet allowed women in the first mosque. Women were competing to get the first role, and they were asking all these questions, and they were embarrassed about asking very personal questions. Bilgin said the same thing. There is a surah in Quran, Surah Mujadala, pleading woman, or the surah struggle. It was revealed upon this plea of a woman. So she says that I don't need to go to the Western world, I don't want to get the title of feminism because it's Orientalist in its essence, because if you call some women as Islamist feminists, you're assuming that Islamic feminist activists are exceptional, Muslim women are in general passive. That reinforces an Orientalist discourse. So these women deliberately, openly, and very enthusiastically refuse any idea about being an activist and being a feminist, and they refute any ideas they feel that comes from the West. And they said that we're Quranist, traditionalists, and we're for the first mosque, because the first mosque actually is the venue to go back to the modern. When they say modern, I need to put it in quotation, because they feel that all we need is in the first mosque. It needs to be studied, it needs to be exposed. Imams, when they get this training, they are not getting Western ideas, they are getting Prophet's ideas. So if imams for them, I said, why imam? Because they seem to be obsessed with imams a little bit. I said, why imam? Because they feel that it embodies patriarchal practices in Islam. And the mosque is a place to allow these patriarchal practices. So they said that if you can change imam, you can change society. If imam can revisit their daily practices and activities, then mosque change. If mosque changes, then you can really have new ideas taking root in society. And they say that then you can talk about the meeting of the two seas, a parable from a new perspective. My idea was we should talk about parable under new light to have all these changes. For them, if you change imam, you can have real discussion about this parable of the two seas. I think that concludes my very long, maybe the longest lecture of this year. I think it's the strategy. The longest the lecture is too long, it doesn't allow you to ask questions.
Maybe just a few.
So, I mean, one of the points you're bringing out is the DRA hews fairly closely to traditional views as they're now defined and fairly conservative in a certain sense. And then the other point was that there's a lot of possibility for activism within the DRA, despite that, and that we shouldn't think of activists or resistors as separated from the state. So I like that summing up very much. And I also like the way you focus on the role of women in this. But with that last theme in mind about resistance and Salafism within the structure, the bureaucratic structure, I couldn't help but think of Fethullah Gulen. And I wondered how his movement plays out in tensions within the DRA. I'm just kind of curious about the same theme taken to that issue. I mean, and I don't know a lot about Gulen. I just know that he was influenced by Sufism, and I don't know if that counts as traditional or that's already a threat. So it's just an invitation to address the same theme.
That's an excellent question. I don't know how many of you know about Gulen movement in India. Some do, some you don't. So it's a really strong, powerful movement. So the question, how would you put Gulen in this picture? And are they engaging with DRA, or are they, am I getting the question right?
Yeah, in the sense in which, are they activists and resistors within DRA or not? I mean, he was...
You know, we can have a whole lecture on Gulen, but I think it should be sufficient to say that Gulen considered itself a civil society movement, which means that it's organized beyond the state, although because Gulen movement is really strong in youth movement, and they invest a lot in education and training. Many of the Gulen supporters would have jobs at state institutions, so there's this organic connection to the state. But one of the questions, it's under research and I don't have an answer. I don't know, and I don't think that I've seen any publication on a strong women theologian from the Gulen movement. As far as I know, we don't have such figure. There's one I would love to know. So if I include women to this equation, one of the critique of the Gulen movement has been the lack of presence of women. So we don't know. It's completely invisible. It's more of a male movement. And at least the part you see in public. So as a result, I don't know how women would play that role in the movement. But Gulen movement is really complicated because they also promote many of the religious rights. One of the issues, it's silent here, I didn't say, but the DRA is serving only Sunni Muslim groups. So there are all these different religious groups, Christian, Jewish minorities. Actually, one of the Christian groups wanted to be part of DRA because if you're a mosque, you don't pay any utility bills. You get all the state support, and they say that we want to be part of DRA so we can get all these freebies. So DRA is really focused on Sunni traditional Islam, and it's an area that Gulen movement is really active, but also Gulen movement is trying to expand these boundaries. They are engaging with other groups more. So I don't think they are focused on DRA. What I would say, actually, DRA might be taking Gulen movement as a model because DRA mosques are now all over the world, which is a model Gulen movement started because they are really active and they are really proud of the fact that they have schools in 160 countries, which covers pretty much everywhere. So DRA right now investing a lot in Africa as part of competition to Gulen movement.
They're in competition with the Gulen movement?
I would say that till recently, maybe it wasn't much of a competition, but because of the recent political scandals and the competition, now maybe it's more of a competition. But the strategic plan made it really clear that the DRA wants to be a global actor. They want to invest in many countries. Surprising for me was Cuba, for instance, because usually the DRA would go to a country with Turkish population and Mali, and I looked up the numbers. In Mali, there are 160 Turks. So you don't want to go to mosque for 160 Turks, but also in Cuba, there are around 45 Turks. So they have brand new mosques for themselves.
It must be very pious Turks.
And the next stage is Latin America. DRA decided to invest in Latin America. So I believe that it's in part because Gulen sets a good example. engaging with different groups, investing in different countries, and Gulen movement would go to any country without any Turkish population whatsoever. So they would start Turkish population. Actually, one of my questions was, maybe in Mali, people are there because of the Gulen movement. Now Mosque is going after the Gulen movement to serve these people.
Yeah, well, Cuba has good beaches, but it's not, I mean, it's a serious point, because it seems to me that what you're showing is, I mean, my question is really, going back to 1965, why did they adopt the French word laïque? What was in turn within Turkish discussions, why did they appropriate that? What did they think that they meant by it? Because it seems like the conventional notion of secular state doesn't fit here at all. This is a more established religious tradition, more established church, effectively, or religion than was in the case of the Church of England and through the 19th century, or, for example, in Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church, which is also effective leadership is selected from the state, even though it's, this seems to be, effectively an official religion, and effectively where the dominant religious tradition has been politicized or controlled and tempered by the state. So it seems like the term secular doesn't seem to apply at all, but I'm curious why they seem to have reached themselves, perhaps recognizing that for this other term, but I'm curious as to what it signified and whether there was debate about that at the time,
Yeah, it was interesting because I was reading the first assembly's debate on Diyanet, the DRA, and it was all about naming, how to name the institution and what words to use to describe it. And you need to understand, in Turkey, the establishment of the republic was really anti-Ottoman, and the Caliph, Sultan was also the leader of the Ottoman Empire, was also Caliph, the leader of the Muslim world. And there's this really interesting debate. Caliphate was intact in 1924, prior to 1924. So they wanted to name the DRA as the representative of the God, which was what Caliphate described in himself. So all these debates, just like the French debate, Turkish Republic was established against an established clergy and a church. So you see this tension, how when I say established church, what I mean by established religious institution under Islam. So Atatürk and his statement that he had Rusya at his bedside, it's true. Atatürk was reading Rusya a lot. Actually, we have his books. He was fluent in French. He would read Rusya and he would take many notes. And I believe it was in part because he was really familiar with the French political thought. And he just adopted the term. But he adopted as a French term. He didn't want to create as a local term, which is really surprising because if you read his writing, he keeps saying that I want to introduce this idea, but it's too soon because people are just so strong in their conviction of the institution, their support of the institution. So this top-down modernization of religion could be partially accurate if you look at the Atatürk's writing, but it was completely not anti-Islamic, but anti-Caliphate, anti-Islamic institutionalization of Islam in Caliphate. So the French word, it's French word, and it's one of the questions that I asked in my survey. I said, what do you mean by laïc when we say laicism? And it was really funny because we asked around 1,200 people, and I thought that different answers would emerge. If you go to the school, my Turkish colleagues here, they know, if you go to school in Turkey, they tell you laicite is the separation of state and religion. That's it. So you just know the meaning of the term. So many of our respondents said the same thing. It's the separation of religion and state. So for many people that created almost a gap in the public discourse and in the discussions. And the Prime Minister, Erdogan, he gave a couple of different descriptions. He said that, well, we got the term wrong because you cannot be laïc as an individual. If you're a state, you can't be laïc because it's about treating all these different religious religious beliefs equally. But if you're a person, you can't be laïc. You have to embrace your religion and you have to promote it. So often what you see, laïc creates all these different debates about etymology and the meaning of the terms, and maybe one of the great outcomes of all these debates would be to define it. But I gave a lecture in Istanbul in November, and my topic was, let's define it, and I tried to create this notion of new secularism that accommodates people like Birkin. Birkin brings these two words together to give them more room, because now in Turkey, because it's so polarized, you need to be either secular, laïc, or religious. It didn't go well. People are still, even if it's not defined well, people are using and researching these terms, recycling these terms.
I think it could be that many Muslim languages did not have equivalent of secular in their own languages, like Persian, Urdu, Arabic. So they adopted some Western term and incorporated it in their own language. Like secular has no meaning in Urdu, so they will take secular as secular and incorporate in Urdu language.
It's an interesting, one of us, maybe Junaid will do the research, but in Arabic, what is the term?
They call it Almania.
Almania, which is
but we don't know where it comes from, because again, it's not
in
traditional.
it's the same thing. It's about they have comparable roots. So someone needs to do research for secularism and like these are the terms we use, but the original Arabic, Turkish, even Hebrew, we don't have.
My question is about law. Does there not have any role in lawmaking or judging the law and looking at the law?
No.
Not at all.
So what would happen, I understand what you say, if it's religiously permissible. Headscarf ban, the DRA just said that it's not admissible, but it was completely its own conduct, its own fatwa. But DRA doesn't have the role to scrutinize, look at all of the laws and decide if they are religiously permissible or not. But they do it independently anyway. So this is why one of the paradoxes that I mentioned, state can say something and DRA would say completely the opposite. DRA says, I don't accept it. But it's not official. It's not official in a way that there is not an institution that is charged to look at all of the laws and decide if they are Islamically acceptable or not.
For example, in India, which is secular, still the law of marriage, divorce, and inheritance for Muslims is governed through Sharia, even though India is a secular Hindu country. So will in Turkey the Amat will interfere in marriage law, inheritance law, or no?
No, but for instance, there was a debate on zina, adultery, and the ruling government wanted to make it illegal to commit adultery. They wanted to make it punishable with crime. So many people thought that it's unacceptable in a secular republic. But his response would be always go and check with the DRA. They should decide. So he feels that if there is a law that has any relevance to religious issues, the DRA should be able to say the last word. One of the rumors I was told directly, this should stay here, but I told the former director of the DRA, Erdogan would ask him a couple of questions, or would say, ask him to give his religious opinion to endorse some of his ideas, and his response always was, this is a secular republic, I don't issue fatwa on state affairs. So he was extremely popular, and he was appointed, and people believe that one of the reasons he refused to engage with political decisions. And the current DRA, director of the DRA, it's the opposite. He for some of the new practices.
Well, I think we need to continue this informally and to thank Sultan.
The issues of like, kind of standing in this place and, do you push it or do you just stick to your contingents and like that interest.
It seems to be.
Nice to have you here again.
But there's some kind of like yes, and I think it's weighted in one direction or the other. But so institutions that would see intermediate. Yeah, right. So you it's like yeah, it's to be.
Sure. You know what I mean? But it's like this shrinking just so much of this, I think, like, it's like really rapid nationalist development. I mean, not that that wasn't there before, but it's suddenly like the conditions and necessity of a nationalist regime are so pressing. So they're kind of like, we need this religion piece, but yet we need the secular. You know what I mean? It's kind of yeah.
It's really interesting because it's to persist in the Arabs that are now emerging as debates.
Right, well, who's the debate? You know what I mean? It's like, what party?
Yeah, exactly.
Would be around, I mean, that.
But that's why Turkey's having Are you going?
Yeah, so kind of like maybe grab a fruit, wash up, and then we'll walk over there.
Sounds good.
I know, it's a busy day.
Yeah, I had to. Next year. No,
But yeah, it's been, I mean, other than that, so, yeah. I think that's kind of how I date it. Like, I read the letter, I was like,
but it's love.
She's Orthodox, and she is finishing a PhD at Brandon. She writes voice
We have already gone up to our,
So right now I'm starting in 10 minutes. See, this is, his name's Sultan.
no thanks, I really enjoyed the talk. You should talk more about it. Yeah, yes. Yes, okay, good. I know we kind of had the offer. That was really interesting, actually, the last slide that you have, because it's so tough.